As Anthony said, my name is Eli Stein. I'm the lead organizer with ROC Minnesota, the Restaurant Opportunity Center of Minnesota. I use they, them pronouns, and I've spent over 13 years working in food service as a server, food runner, cook, and now I'm the lead organizer with ROC Minnesota. We're here today to celebrate a victory that represents a huge step for workers in the food service industry in Minnesota. This victory happened because workers came together, they talked about issues in their workplace, and they took action to create solutions for those issues. And I just want to say that again, that this settlement would not have happened without workers talking to each other, connecting to ROC Minnesota, and taking action to create resolution. What that looked like was workers getting in contact with ROC Minnesota in 2021 and had identified that there were lots of issues at their workplace, and other folks will speak to that. But one of the main issues was that folks really reported not being paid the correct wage, the correct minimum wage, and had even reported to us that they had brought this up to managers and the owners, and action wasn't taken. And so we supported workers connecting to the City of Minneapolis Civil Rights Department and filing wage theft and paid sick and safe time complaints with the city. In that partnership, and as a result, the city opened up an investigation and has come to this final settlement for over $28,000 in unpaid wages, unpaid sick and safe time wages, and damages associated with those. And I just want to name that we see wage theft happen in our industry all the time. We have some of the highest rates of wage theft, and it looks like many different things, not just unpaid minimum wages. And it takes an immense amount of courage for workers to identify that things are going wrong and take action. We know that bosses sometimes retaliate, and that bosses really hold a lot of levers that affect our lives and our livelihood. And so taking action in a case like this is risky and takes incredible courage. And that's extremely exciting for us. So I think that just the last thing that I want to say is that at ROC Minnesota, we support workers across this industry, and we support workers in solving legal issues and extra legal issues that the law doesn't necessarily protect us on, but are issues of dignity and morality. And every day we get calls from workers who are taking more and more steps, like the workers that are on this call. And every time that we fight, we win. And I just want to say that again, that every time workers take a stand, come together to understand their rights better, every time we do that, we win changes in our workplaces. Some are small and some are really big, but every time we fight, we win. And I just couldn't be more happy and more honored and more proud of the work that we're doing than I am today, and standing with some of the workers that were a part of that. So I will, Anthony, I think I'm going to hand it back to you to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Eli. We really appreciate your great work and your leadership there in ROC Minnesota. A short reminder for all the reporters on the call: if you have any question, please post your name and your organization at any given time in the chat box, and you will be asked to unmute yourself when you ask your question during the Q&A. And so now we will hear from a current Blaze Pizza worker, Sydney Kuran. She was part of the group of workers who worked with ROC Minnesota and the City of Minneapolis Civil Rights Department to win back wages for her and her co-workers. Sydney will share her story.
Hi, thank you everyone for being here. As Anthony said, my name is Sydney Kuran. I'm a senior nursing major and ROC MN member. I was hired by Team DHW, who are the former owners of Blaze Pizza, in September 2020, And it was the first job I had while also doing school, so I was nervous about it. I wasn't sure if I could balance it all, but the crew at Blaze seemed really relaxed. I quickly learned, however, that while the crew was agreeable, the management was really disorganized. On my first shift, I was trained in only one role of the many required to maintain the restaurant running smoothly. Everything else I learned over the next few weeks was information I had to seek out myself. Schedules also came out the night before the week started, and concerns we raised surrounding the safety of the store in the midst of COVID vaccines were dismissed. All of this also was before I learned that we weren't being paid a legal wage. I remember going into work one day and hearing a coworker complain about our wages. This was maybe 3 months into me working at Blaze. Until then, I had no idea anything was wrong. I expected that they were paying me a legal wage. I trusted them to do that because why wouldn't they? From my coworker, I learned about the wage violations, and they had spoken to our manager about it, but weren't hopeful about any resolution. Apparently, questions regarding pay had been raised before and were always dismissed. According to upper management, it wasn't in the budget. Meanwhile, I took out another loan to cover school and living expenses, which was really frustrating. I believe it was 3 times that our store manager told us that we were getting a raise to like $12.25. But I don't know if he was really fighting for that or if he was just trying to appease us. Regardless, the money never came, and I never actually noticed it until months later because at that time funds were so tight for me that I dreaded looking at my weekly paychecks to the point where I avoided looking at them at all. Things really started to get bad, however, when the experienced staff started leaving. They were tired of false promises and blatant lack of care, and I was happy for them finally moving on with their lives. Unfortunately, though, with them went any semblance of organization. Training became nearly non-existent, and our turnover rates increased exponentially. Things progressed to a point where I dreaded work more than I cared about the money it provided me, but the thought of applying to a new job during school felt like too daunting of a task. So instead, during the lulls of my shift, I fantasized about like walking out of the door and never showing up again. And that was like my only escape. I wanted so badly to be anywhere else, but felt stuck in a position where my work was valued below minimum wage. Then one of my former coworkers reached out to me with the number of a representative at ROC, Minnesota. I'd heard of them earlier, but everything had gotten to the before everything had gotten to the point of oblivion, but I felt I was too busy to reach out. But now had been pushed over my limit, so I met with ROC, and they helped me to file a complaint with the city. They told me exactly what the managers of Blaze were in violation of, and empowered my coworkers and I to take action. I was ready to be valued and to make sure that Team DHW understood what we all deserved and paid us back what we were owed. Today, I'm relieved to say that we got some retribution. We were being compensated for the stolen wages, omission of sick and safe time, and damages. In the end, the fight has been worth it, and I hope that our case inspires other Minneapolis workers to band together and fight for their rights. In numbers, we have strength, not only as coworkers fighting for one case, but as employees seeking dignity and respect all across the city. The more people we have organizing and holding our employers accountable, the safer an environment we can make Minneapolis a place to work and live.
Amazing. Thank you, Sydney. Next, I'm going to introduce, it is a pleasure to introduce Council Member for Ward 2, Robin Wonsley Worlobah. And I'll hand it to you.
Thank you, Eli, and thank you all so much for having me. As Eli mentioned, I'm the council member for Ward 2, which is home to the University of Minnesota, meaning that Blaze Pizza is right in our ward. So I'm very happy to be here and supporting the workers who were able to organize on their behalf and do so in partnership with both ROC, MN, and also extend that partnership to the city of Minneapolis with the Civil Rights Department to really make sure that we are, exemplifying a good model of what co-enforcement looks like behind some of these very progressive policies that we often organize a lot outside of City Hall to bring forward. As a case example, the wage theft policy. If it hadn't been for amazing workers like Sydney and their colleagues and the existence of organizations like ROC, I also want to give a shout out to, other organizations like Setu and Awood who have been doing a lot of this work and supporting our workers who are not getting the fair treatment, getting the wages that they deserve legally and just overall. And it's been left up to these workers, left up to these organizations to hold these corporate actors in our communities accountable. And Sydney raised a really good point. You would think that, as a worker, that should not be your role. You should be there to do your job, earn your wage, and go home, be respected, don't have to stress out, and trust that these corporations that have massive amounts of budgets with massive numbers of staff are doing everything that they can to make sure that you get paid on time, get the accurate wages that you deserve, all of your benefits are provided to you, and yet in the midst of you having to worry about school and possibly looking for other jobs and then taking on additional, stressors such as additional financial debt, then you're put into the position to hold your own employer accountable. And that's just completely unacceptable. So I think for me in the charge or my office and collaborating with our fellow colleagues is to do everything that we can to make sure that we're fully funding the co-enforcement model of these wage theft policies and other worker rights policies that have happened when, as many of you have articulated, when workers stood up and said enough is enough and decided to organize for better treatment, better workplace conditions. And they extended that to City Hall and say, as elected leaders that say you support workers, you need to make sure that we set those standards across the board and make sure our policies are not only reflective of that, but then they are enforced so that they can be effective, and also making sure workers are treated well in our city. So I just want to say thank you to all the workers at Blaze. I also want to say my apologies because this work should not have happened, or this work or burden of this work should not have been placed on your shoulders to begin with. And also want to say, I know, again, because we have both the University of Minnesota and Augsburg students, we see often students are usually, the fall victim to wage theft situations. And as a result of it, some of the things that you named, we see a lot of our workers, student workers, end up having to take on multiple jobs while you're there to earn your education. Or worse yet, have to take on additional debt that's going to follow you, post your academic career in order to make ends meet. And that's just completely unacceptable. In a city that has a large concentration of Fortune 500 companies, we should be doing everything that we can to make sure we're paying folks even above $15 at this point, including our students, regardless of where you inhabit. We need to be making sure that, working with our state partners and federal lawmakers, that you all should be having a tuition-free university so you don't have to go and work at exploitative companies in the first place. So, as a democratic socialist, I see the connections between wage theft to, the predatory lending practices that happens at many of our four-year higher ed institutions to even, the housing development that surrounds the University of Minnesota, which is one of the key reasons why I support rent control, because we have so many students who are having to take out debt or work 2 or 3 jobs, not get paid the wages that they deserve because they're being stolen in order to cover housing, cover food, and get an education. So it's just unrealistic of the toll that our students are having to bear in our current economic climate. But I'm nevertheless so grateful that again, we're seeing workers constantly rise up, like yourself, Sydney, and those at Blaze, those at ROC, all of the service, workers, whether you're organized or through unionization or not, the fact that you're taking that step sets up just an example for other workers that they don't have to deserve, subpar workplace conditions, and they definitely don't have to deserve having their wages stolen after they went in and did a hard day's work. So thank you all. You have an ally at the city who will do everything that we can to make sure that we're strengthening our wage theft enforcement practices and working with you all to bring forward additional worker rights policies that make sure that you are treated in the utmost care that you deserve for providing key services to our city and to our residents. So thank you all.
Thank you, Council Member Worlobah. It has been truly an honor having you here on this press call. For reporters who are on this call, again, please write your questions in the chat box. I know we have the top 5 television stations in the city, and we will call your name during the Q&A at the end of the presentations. Our next speaker is a former worker at Blaze Pizza at Stadium Village. She will also share with us her story as well as the wage violations that she experienced under the former management. Let's welcome Ibe Tarrant. I'll hand it over to you now, Ibe.
Hello, my name is Ibe Tarrant, and I worked at Blaze Pizza from October of 2017 to March of 2021. And I've worked in the food service industry for about 8 years now. I'm a ROC Minnesota member, and I'm currently residing down in Phoenix, working my way into the music industry. So working at Blaze Pizza was quite the experience. I worked there for 3.5 years throughout my time in college at the University of Minnesota. And to be honest, when I look back and think about my college experience, Blaze was at the forefront. I worked full time, so Blaze occupied most of my life outside of school. The store was poorly managed from the start. People often wouldn't show up to their shifts, leaving us short-staffed at times such as game days when we had lines out the door. The training was limited and inconsistent, leaving employees unsure of how to properly do their job. The schedule was put out a day before the work week, which made it hard for us to plan our lives outside of work. And the general manager did not seem to care about his job, giving the staff little motivation to put in the effort needed to run their restaurant well. I didn't know the owners were stealing my wages. However, there was a poster of the labor laws in the kitchen that I would read occasionally and wonder if we were being paid correctly. So I brought it up to the management a couple times, but they were dismissive about the issue. From conversations with my coworkers, I know that many of us felt overworked, underpaid, and underappreciated most of the time. My friend who worked at Blaze with me knew someone who had spoken with ROC Minnesota, and we got in touch with Eli, and they were a tremendous help to us by educating us on our rights as workers and guiding us through the process of filing a claim with the city. When I found out that Blaze was in fact underpaying us, I was shocked but not surprised because I felt like the company was untrustworthy. I was excited to learn that there was something we could do about the stolen wages and that there was a possibility of getting money back. Filing the claim was actually pretty simple, which made the whole process very easy. Fast forwarding to now, I remember waking up from a nap to a text from Eli saying the settlement was finalized and Blaze was going to pay about $30,000 of stolen wages back to their employees. This was huge news and I was super happy and relieved. It took about 5 months between filing the claim and receiving the news, so I wasn't sure what the outcome would be, but it was better than I had imagined. I encourage everyone to make sure they're being paid correctly and review their rights as workers. Many businesses cheat money out of their employees, and it is important to hold them accountable and get your reparations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibe. Really appreciate your presence here. It's really empowering to listen to your story. Now, our final speaker, but certainly not the least, Our concluding speaker for today is the president and CEO of the Restaurant Opportunity Centers United, Dr. Siku Sibi. He will share with us some facts about wage theft and some of the past wage settlements that our worker members organized to make it happen, including the one last year in Minnesota. He will also speak about the Restaurant Workers' Bill of Rights, one of the most vital and critical policies that can eliminate wage violations. Let's welcome Dr. Siku Sibi.
Thank you, Anthony and Eli. Thank you, Minneapolis City Council member, Robin Wonsley. It is such an honor to have you. And most of all, thank you, Sydney and Ibai, and all the workers and friends who are joining us here. I have to take this moment to express how delighted I am today, celebrating the nearly $30,000 wage settlement with Blaze Pizza workers in Minneapolis. This is a huge victory, and I'm really proud of what the workers in ROC, Minnesota have accomplished. Wage theft and violation should have no place in any workplace. What really breaks my heart is that the workers who have been robbed by the employers are most among the workers who have the lowest wage in America. They are the ones who need the hourly pay the most to support the families and the children. And they are the ones who work the longest hours in a month. But here are some staggering facts about the wage theft. The Department of Labor reports that there are more wage violations in the restaurant industry than any other industry in the United States. Between 2010 and 2012, about 84% of full-service restaurant workers, investigated have violated labor standards. Wage theft and hour violation impacted nearly 2.5 million restaurant workers. They lose more than $8 billion each year, according to the Economic Policy Institute. Last year alone, ROC United helped recover nearly $1 million in wage settlement for workers in California, Tennessee, and the Bartman restaurant workers in Minnesota. Since the pandemic hit in 2020, case of wage theft went up, said the Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division. You know why restaurant workers are susceptible to wage theft. Why wage theft is rampant across the country. Because the employer think that they can do it and get away with it. The good thing is that there is a ray of hope. Wage theft can be solved. It can be eradicated and from happening again through an effective and smart policy. As the president and CEO of ROC United, the largest and oldest restaurant worker organization in the country, I have to say that this is the reason why we need a restaurant worker bill of rights, a comprehensive policy framework that will champion at local, state, and national level. The restaurant worker bill of rights will systematically address challenges, injustices, including wage theft and discrimination that restaurant workers, and especially the people of color and women, face every day. It will focus on what restaurant workers deserve. Number one, a thriving life. Number two, healing and rest. Number three, a safe and dignified work environment. Number four, a universal healthcare and bodily autonomy. And number five, a participation in governance. By Labor Day, on September 5th, ROC United planned to introduce the first restaurant worker bill of rights, accompanied by model local, state, and federal legislation that policymakers can introduce in their own communities in the US Congress. We must continue to educate restaurant workers about their right, to encourage them to speak out if they are not paid the amount that they have worked hard for, or they are feeling violated. The workers at Blaze Pizza in Stadium Village in Minneapolis organized themselves, raised their voices, and held the employer accountable. It was not only the right thing to do, it has to be done. At the end of the day, we shall defend and sustain the rule of law. Thank you very much.